Hello, and welcome back to another fun-filled episode of the Hammercast. I'm your host, Alex, the Hebrew Hammer Salkin, and joining me today is Sean Sewell. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yes, sir. Sean
Okay,
Sewell.
good. I thought I did. I'm usually pretty good about pronouncing names, but every so often I get them wrong. I had Christy Grussert on my podcast a couple months ago, and it looks like Grossart. And I was like, now is it Grossart or Grosart? She's like Grussert. I'm like, I'll try to remember that. And then I introduced her, and I was like, Christy Grossart. She's like, yeah. And I was like, no, wait, it was Grussart, right? She's like, yes, it's Grussart. She was just being very polite, like not correcting me. So
Yeah.
I wanted to double check. But at any rate, we're going to be talking about a lot of cool stuff today. Sean has an awesome podcast called the Endearment Podcast. I've had the privilege of being a guest a couple of times on that. And Sean is like a phenom when it comes to outdoor training. He lives out in Colorado in an undisclosed underground bunker, I am told. Maybe not. That may be an exaggeration. But we're going to talk a lot about kind of his origin story, how he got into kettlebells, some of the cool stuff he's done. He's worked directly with Pavel, for instance. It's just going to be a good old time. So before we kick it off, as always, I always like to mention that if you are listening for the first time, or if you have not heard of it, I have a great kettlebell and bodyweight challenge called the 9-minute kettlebell and bodyweight challenge. And it is something that can be done in conjunction with whatever you're doing right now. So if you're working currently on a specific program, a lot of people find it works very good as a finisher, or even something as they toss in the middle of their training, or maybe do on their in-between days. But they're very simple movements. They're based around the gait pattern. So there's not a whole lot of technique to learn, but it does a lot to help you to strengthen a wide variety of kettlebell and calisthenics movements. And again, it does so without wailing and gnashing of teeth, as is so common in most other challenges. So if you're interested in it, just go to 9minutechallenge.com. You can pick up your own free copy. And if you already have one, feel free to write me a rave review. I've gotten a couple of them. Eventually, I'll feature them on the show, but I've had a lot of people reach out and tell me how much they liked it. So 9minutechallenge.com. And there you have it. There you be. You'll be able to get your hands on it. And now, without further ado, Sean, thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, my absolute pleasure, Alex. And I've been a big fan of yours for many years. I love your programming. One of my favorites of yours was the crawling, just crawling every day.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, back in the day. So I take your advice very seriously, and I think listeners should too.
Good. Excellent. Checks in the mail. No, kidding aside. No, I'm very glad to hear that. I think that, one of the great things about this, the community of like Strong First and the kettlebell world in general, is that there's a lot to learn from everybody, and everybody brings something new to the table. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because, you're probably one of the, I would say probably the top experts in like outdoor sports and kettlebell training and how the two combine. And I know that you've gotten listenership all over the world. I know you've got a very popular podcast throughout Europe, throughout the United States. And I'm curious in particular, now I know you live in Denver now, but I'm curious about your origin story. Like what got you into strength training? Well, let's say fitness in general. We'll start more general, we'll work more specific. What got you into fitness in general? Like, were you always fit? Was it something you discovered at a later date? And then how did the kettlebell end up coming into the picture along the way?
No, that's a fun question. I can go a lot of different ways. Grew up in a morbidly obese household in Omaha, Nebraska, where you're from.
Mm-hmm. And that didn't surprise me, by the way. the connection of the Omaha and the obesity.
It's very, very common out there, Midwest. And I was always healthy. My siblings were overweight and special needs. And so I wanted to be their superhero. So I got in lifting weights, realized I can quickly change my aesthetic. And then it transferred over into what I enjoyed doing, which was not team sports. It was hiking and camping and working. I got 3 paper outs, and I got my friends to work with me. We made money. We bought guitars, and life was good. So I saw how well training can improve work capacity for work as well as for activity. And then I had always enjoyed it, but I went into music career, DJ professionally for several years. And then working in a corporate world, my younger brother, at age 21, actually had a heart attack and passed away. And so that motivated me to leave this DJing and corporate world lifestyle, get educated in health and fitness, and start my business, Colorado Personal Fitness. So it's kind of, that's my motivation. My passion is to help people with their outdoor activities and adventures, as well as their family life, to play with their kids and grandkids and such. So yeah, learning that you can transfer training to life activities has been my goal to share with other people.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because I feel like a lot of the people who, maybe not everybody who gets into personal training, in fact, almost certainly not everybody who gets into it, but a great many people who get into it and stay in personal training, they have like this mission, like something
Yeah,
happened to them at some point along the way that made them think like, I really need to help people and I really need to reach out and let people know about like what I know so that they can make change in their own life, you know.
yeah, that's a good
And
point.
and it does sound like that was a big case, like that was the case very much for you as well,
Mhm.
based on what you just mentioned about wanting to do this after the tragic loss of your brother. Now, was when you first got into it, I would assume that the kettlebell was not yet in the picture. So like
No.
what was your approach? Because you mentioned hiking, you mentioned like kind of outdoors type of stuff, camping. And that's a very physical kind of activity. Like my
Mhm.
friend Sarah Smith would call that, I think, like middle movement. It's not
Okay.
something that's super technical. It's not like quote exercise, let's say, but it is movement and it is healthy and it is very important. And so, were you kind of like the standard? Was it like free weights? Was it machines? Was it the group fitness? How did you get into it?
Oh, you'll love this. So I always preferred suspension trainers, rings or TRX,
Oh,
body
nice.
weight. Yeah, and calisthenics. When I first started out, everybody's like, "You're never going to make it using just those tools. You have to use machines. You have to use this, crap programming, in my opinion."
Yeah.
And so, partly out of spite, I wanted to prove them wrong, and also it's more than anything wanted to help people. And I felt like those are the best tools, like proper movement,
Hmm.
proper screening. And then I saw Steve Cotter doing a lot of kettlebell exercises, and then the gym we built, somebody had brought in kettlebells, and so I was kind of playing around with it and kind of emulating what I saw Steve do. And then I was working with one of my clients. Oh, it's got to be 8, 9, 10 years ago, and she's like, "You'd really like my friend Eric Frohart. He loves hiking, he loves the outdoors, and he loves kettlebells." So I blindly email Eric Frohart, not knowing at the time he was the CEO of Strong First. I just thought this is a person who wants to go get coffee and go for a hike.
Yeah.
We hit it off and we have such a good time. He's like, "Sean, I would love for you to enroll in the kettlebell user course." I signed up for the 1 day course with Mark Snow, again from Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Mark Snow, great guy. And I fell in love in the first 10 minutes. On the first break, I enrolled for SFG 1. I was hooked. So that was 2014, 15. So
Yeah.
kind of later for me to get into the kettlebell education. But once I was in, I was all in, did the SFB, SFL. Mountain Strong was a course we offered with Zara Horton.
Mm.
Strong Endurance in 2017. I really enjoyed that. I took to that so well that Eric Frohart and I wrote an article with Pavel for Strong First on how to apply strong endurance protocols for improving your ski season. And it worked really well. And it was just swings and push-ups basically. And the kettlebell is such a useful tool for anything outdoors.
What's really interesting about that too is that it's like, to me, it seems like the obvious thing for like outdoors type folks. It's like, you're going to, especially if there's like skiing, it's like, look, man, you're going to have to use your legs a lot. So they're going to need to be
Mhm.
strong. They're going to need to have good stamina, like that all day strength, right? You're going to need some good mobility. So goblet squats,
Yeah.
things of that nature. You might wipe out a couple times. It's going to be good. And you might have some gear on. It's going to be good to be able to do get ups, right? And I've
Mhm.
only gotten, this is only like the foundational stuff with kettlebell training. But I would imagine that prior to, apart from Eric, because Eric is obviously a very outdoorsy type of guy and he understood the value of kettlebells. I would bet you didn't really see a whole lot of kettlebell training amongst the outdoorsy types, did you?
Not as much. And if it was, it would probably come from like CrossFit and people using the kettlebell for like cardio by doing a massive amount of swings in a row with not what we would consider the best form, I'm sure.
Sure.
So I felt it was a really easy opportunity to fill by helping educate people and educate other trainers. So I was the head trainer at the gym I built, educate them properly and how to keep people from messing themselves up and keep
Mhm.
them on their path. Yeah, the kettlebell, whether you're going to put it in your backpack and ruck, do the loaded carries, the farmer's carries, suitcase carries, or do the swings, get ups, goblet squats, like you mentioned, they're all so useful in how they carry over. Like you said, you're going to crash. Well, at the very least, you're going to start out sitting down. You have to get up, whether you're skiing or snowboarding. So, a lot of proper movement, loading that movement safely, and increasing your work capacity basically to do multiple laps. And what I do is not lift access. I climb the mountain and then I snowboard down it. It's called split boarding. And it's my favorite activity. It's great cardio. As we joke with Pat Flynn, nobody wants to uphill ski. Well, I uphill ski for like an hour or two at a time, and it's fantastic for conditioning. And the reward is you get to ski or snowboard back down to your vehicle, have a sandwich. So the kettlebell has been very, very helpful, as well as Bodyweight, to help me get in that kind of condition and teach others how to do that too.
That makes perfect sense. It's like the ultimate, the way I like to think of things is like if people want to get a really, let's say, a close view of something, or they want to zoom in on something, it first helps to zoom out, kind of see where you are. So you don't have to you're not looking at the map, with it like right in front of your face. You have to be able to pan over relatively quickly. And so really the essence of strength training is being able to move your body through free space and being able to move odd objects through free space.
Yeah.
So that's why I think the kettlebell and when I say odd objects, it means like awkward objects too. The kettlebell, even though it has a certain calibration to it, it's kind of an awkward implement, to use. So it's like, I think it better replicates the real world type of movement that you're going to have to do. Like you're going to have to move something that's going to be odd and awkward and off-centered and that sort of a thing. And that's certainly something that comes in handy for anything outdoors, anything indoors, really. But again, I think especially for hiking, you're thinking, you're going to be on your feet the whole day. It might be helpful to have some pep in your step. You're gonna have some. You mentioned going uphill before going downhill, and enjoying your sandwich as a reward. There's got to be like a lot of repetitive movement through the hips, and so it's like, what better way to learn how to do that than with some explosive kettlebell swings,
Yeah.
snatches, and things like that. I mentioned Eric, and for the people who, I know you mentioned he was the CEO. I think people may not know a whole lot about him. He's since gone on to pursue other interests, but he was an excellent CEO, as I recall. And I think one of the things that he did a great job with was increasing the enthusiasm that people had for the kettlebell and for strength training, but most importantly also for doing something outside of it. I think exercise for exercise's sake is still perfectly fine. But I would be curious, if somebody is, let's say they live in Denver, or they live in an area where they could do some hiking, they could do some skiing, and they just don't do it regularly. How would you recommend that they make the opposite move? Because up to this point, we've talked about getting people who are into outdoor sports using the kettlebell. So what would your like, let's say, pitch be for somebody who loves the kettlebell, has opportunities to do some cool outdoor activities, but just hasn't really taken them?
So a person who is more gym focused with the kettlebell and get them excited about the outdoors?
Exactly.
Oh, cool. Well, I try and give this carrot to all my clients and students. For example, this morning I have several different people I worked with who moved here from, say, Kentucky or other flat states. They're really new to outdoor recreation in the capacity we offer here in Colorado. So as a carrot, I often say, if you succeed through this month of conditioning, I will reward you with a 1-hour hike and a sandwich over at this great spot. And it gets them thrilled to go out there and apply what they do in the gym, in the real world activity. Then they can take their spouse or their kids or whomever and share that excitement with them. And then, of course, we get them geared up. That's a whole nother topic for down the podcast, but yeah. So I would give them that carrot of what we can do. And I try and on my Colorado Personal Fitness Instagram, I don't put a lot of training stuff because I think we all know how we train. I try and put out what we're doing with that training. Was it split boarding? Is it hiking? Is it playing with our dogs? Is it doing activities outdoors, which we do? That's what we do out here. It's our lifestyle, the Colorado lifestyle. So I believe the people I get to work with already see that branding. I don't want to call it marketing, but branding, what we do. And like, oh, I want some of that. I want to go ski. I want to take my family to Vail. I want to do a 2-day backpacking trip. And so they're really curious about that. And they're like, how do we apply that? What tools do we use? And so it's definitely helped working with Pavel and being associated with Strong First and getting that international recognition on applying the kettlebell for these activities. So it kind of leads itself in my business, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. No, I like the idea because I think it's one of those things that people, especially if they've moved from like a flat state, as you mentioned, may not really think a whole lot about doing because it's just not in, their hobbies. It's like,
True.
they had other hobbies that were more common for, let's say, Kentucky or Nebraska or something like that. But even though instinctively, like anybody who moves to Colorado knows, like hiking is great, like going in the mountains is a lot of fun.
Mhm.
But it's like, but a lot of people, I think, kind of don't like the idea of like, okay, well, if I just go by myself, like I'm not going to know what I'm doing. I'm gonna like maybe I'm
Oh,
not
it's
going to wear the right
scary.
footwear. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like going into the wilderness. Like if you were to, I don't know, if you were to move to like Arizona and it were popular to, I don't walk through the desert. I didn't really, prepare a scenario in my head properly, but
Like
you would probably,
canyoneering.
yeah, exactly. You would probably feel the same way unless somebody went with you and you're like, okay, well then maybe I would do it. Like,
100%. Yeah, you want to lower the entry barrier and make it
mhm.
comfortable and safe
Yep.
for them and rewarding, so they want to do it again. Yeah, if I went to Arizona, I wouldn't even know how to begin to canyoneer or do anything like that. I'd be afraid of scorpions gonna bite me in the foot or something.
Correct.
Yeah,
Exactly. No, I think that's awesome. And I bet you anything, a lot of people, when they do it, they're like, wow, there's a lot of fun. It doesn't feel like a workout, but it feels like
yeah,
you got one in,
yeah.
and,
It's so rewarding.
now, and what now, because it's very hilly, I would also imagine that it's one of those things where people kind of surprise themselves. They're like, I wouldn't have guessed I could do all of these hills. I feel great.
100%. Good example. One of my friends who worked in the bar industry up until COVID um, had never really gone on a big hike. Out here, we have mountains over 14,000 feet. We call them
Mm,
14ers.
mm,
On a whim, he hiked a 14er, like almost on accident, which is like something people strive for. It's like as a bucket list kind of thing. We have 54 or 58, depending on who you ask, out here. He was super excited. He called me from the top of the mountain. I was surprised I had reception. He's like, dude, I just climbed a 14er. Like instead of, he went snowboarding and then he climbed a 14er. Instead of going home to watch football, he did this. He's like, I didn't know I had the capacity to do this. And it was from the training in the gym, the consistency, the application of the kettlebell, proper movement. He was capable of doing this pretty amazing accomplishment.
yeah. That is really awesome. I know nothing about 14ers other than what you just said. So for me,
It's just a big hike.
yeah, it sounds huge. I
Mhm.
mean, it definitely doesn't sound like just a standard hike, which is really, really cool. Now, one of the things too that I think is really great about that is that this idea of they're just being consistent. They're
Mhm.
not they're not trying to go for the 14er, because that's actually one thing that I've learned over the years, that I think that if people have sort of like, let's say, a destination goal,
Mhm.
then it kind of gives them anxiety because they're not focusing on what they're doing now. They're focusing on, like, all they can think about is like that future thing, and it just psychs them out. And so this idea of just being consistent, you show up, you're doing your kettlebell and bodyweight work, doing other stuff that you enjoy, you're going to find you have the capacity to do that. You have it in you
Mhm.
just because you've laid the groundwork, and you didn't crush yourself to do it. You weren't, there was no like, Rocky Four montage of you chasing chickens or something like that.
Yeah.
It was just some really basic foundational movements, and it took you a very long way. Now I got to believe that that built some really good buy-in for them, because they're like, oh my gosh, like you said, I can't even believe I did it. I didn't
Oh,
have the
they're
capacity to do it.
Yeah, they're fanatics, and I think if you're a business owner, you want fanatical clients and students.
Hmm.
And I know we're not talking about this topic quite yet, but like marketing wise, I don't market at all because my people I work with do it for me. They send me great messages. Like yesterday, I had a great message. Grandfather was up on a 2 week ski trip with his kids, and he taught his grandkid to ski, and he was so excited. And I get the call, thank you for the taking the time to do this correctly so I can do this with my grandkid and my kids. And that's the kind of stuff you want. You want people to be so um, excited about what you're doing and seeing those real world results that they in his synagogue, he refers me to people all the time and train Rastafarians. And there's not a lot of Rastafarians in Denver, so the word spreads pretty quickly,
Yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah, they're all speaking patois this morning, and it's fantastic. Yeah, you do the right thing, people benefit. They're going to spread the word for you.
No, it's 100% the case. I think that, especially, is very cool what you mentioned about the real world elements of all of this, because that's really what it comes down to. Like I will routinely, like in my emails, or periodically on social media, I'll reference one of my favorite movies ever, which is Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. You know how, like, it's like right at the very end. Spoiler alert, folks! If you haven't seen it, it came out in 1989, so actually you have no
Have to see it.
excuse. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Seriously. It's probably older than like your kids, so please just watch it. But he goes into that area where that Knight Templar has been this whole time guarding the Grail and all this other stuff, and he drinks from the Grail, and he's told the Grail cannot pass beyond the Great Seal, because for that is the honor and the price of immortality. So it's like what I think is really profound about it is that there's this who wouldn't like to just not die? Like this idea of immortality is great, but then, caveat, you have to live alone in some cave that no one knows about, and I think it's very much the same with fitness. A lot of times people are more focused on the vanity metrics of what they get in the gym, and then they see that it doesn't necessarily, or eventually they find out maybe this doesn't really apply to the outside world, or they're trying to do some sort of physical activity in the outside world, and they find that they're woefully unprepared for it. Like, I remember a number of years ago, a friend of mine was telling me I think he was watching it was a TV show or a documentary with some bodybuilder was on a horse. I think it was I don't remember exactly what it was. He was on a horse and he fell off and he like tore a hamstring because he was, I don't know how it would have happened, but like the takeaway that my friend mentioned was, the guy was just so like Frankenstein together. Like everything was just, things weren't made to move together. And so he couldn't like fall and then, maybe feel a little bruised up and then dust himself off. Like all of the vanity metrics he had in the gym didn't do anything for him in the real world. Like the minute he fell just a couple feet off of a horse, he mystically tore a hamstring. So I think it's very much the same with a lot of people. People go into the gym and, they spend time in a group fitness class or whatever it may be, or just hitting the weights, but they're not doing it in a way that has any carryover to their real life. So they try to scale a mountain or just do a 14 or any of these other things. And it's like, they just can't keep up. And, especially if they have the reputation of going to the gym a lot, people are going to be like, well, what's all that gym time good for? Like you can't even walk up, the non-14er, whatever, like an easier one would be.
Totally. Yeah, they lack the actual like health component. I was talking with Brett Jones. He brought up a really good point. I think your audience will dig this too. The only time fitness comes before health is in the alphabet.
There you go.
Yeah, it's all about like helping our people feel good, move well, feel good between the ears, really importantly, and then their fitness, of course, improves and their capabilities improve in the real world. Not the vanity, not necessarily what you see in the mirror. That's just a nice side effect.
The thing is too, it's like people want, and understandably people want those things, but I think anybody would agree that they wouldn't trade that for the ability to pick up their kids, or roughhouse with them. They would rather have, let's say, a mediocre physique and be able to be really resilient than like a really incredible physique and be really brittle. Now, incidentally, those are not mutually exclusive. You could definitely have both. And so if you train intelligently, like the way that you teach people, the way that I teach people, they're both, certainly very achievable. But yeah, without question, like realistically speaking, that's really what people want. So I think it's great that you're focusing on that, like on your Facebook posts and things like that, because really it is the end goal. Like what can you do in the real world that matters the most? It's not the same thing as even like playing an instrument, like I play an instrument, you play instruments, but it's to some degree, it's kind of like a personal interest, but it is not necessarily going to help you to, get closer with your family, like we were talking about, your nieces and stuff like that. They might find it cool when you play guitar, but they probably find it even cooler when you're able to, get down on the floor and play with them or, roughhouse with them and stuff like that. This is in my opinion, it's the essence of what fitness is supposed to be.
100%.
Now, since we're talking about younger folks, and you mentioned that there's that grandpa who was teaching his kid how to ski, do you teach any younger folks at all, like for sports related stuff or just general fitness?
I try not to. I started to get down that rabbit hole like 10 years ago, 11 years ago. But I do let the kids come in sometimes. Like say I train a deaf couple and they bring in their daughter and she's really into gymnastics. So there's a lot of things, hollow holds, bridges, all these things. I'm like, how about you do that while your folks are doing the kettlebell swing, for example? And they love it. It's a good family dynamic. Oftentimes, especially during COVID, if I was doing virtuals, you have the whole family and then you get excited. And off record, we're talking about our nieces.
Yeah.
And I don't get to share with them on social media because the parents requested that. But
Sure.
my wife and I have been an integral part. I'd say 20% of our life is with our nieces. We have 4 of them under age 7. So I'm very involved with the kiddos. And they, like to your point, they know I play guitar. They're interested for like 10 seconds in that, but they much rather throw snowballs at each other and roughhouse in the backyard, which I think is even more fun. So I get to be that fun uncle.
Absolutely. And it's funny too, because I just revamped an old challenge of mine called Hanguary. And one of the things that I was talking about was it was in an email on that topic, was that, like, kids do this stuff naturally. Like when I was a kid, I remember, because you understand this because you grew up around the same era, where it was like there were no plastic playgrounds. Everything was like wood and metal and like
Concrete.
stone. Yeah, exactly. It was like the stakes were high if you were going to have a fun
Concussions
time.
will happen.
Exactly. And I remember I loved the jungle gym, for example. It was just so much fun to just be hanging by your hands and go from one point to the other. And it's not just a fun thing. It's actually like the human body is made to do these things. And kids have this great intuition about that because they like to run and jump and tumble and climb and hang and stuff like that. And if you really want to be present with them, whether they're your kids or your nieces and nephews or grandkids, it's like it helps to meet them where they are rather than expect, oh, why don't you come inside and I'm going to sit in my recliner and like whine about my back and stuff like that. You got to be present. And I think you've nailed it right there. I think I would imagine that not training kids too much probably has something to do with the fact that you understand that they need to play. They don't need a ton of training.
Not the ones I meet, no. And I think that the kids get inspired seeing their parents do these activities.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'd rather see them do the gymnastics or the martial arts or whatever activities keep them active and having fun. They're kids, they should be out doing fun stuff.
And I think parents realize that instinctively. Like no parent is well, with one exception. I remember actually my friend Tim Anderson, the founder of Original Strength. He had his boys. I remember he said one of them, I don't remember if it was the youngest one or not, but his youngest one like loves to read books. Like, a lot of parents are like, kind of like harp on their kids to read or whatever. So he'll harp on them to put the book down and go play outside, for example. Whereas usually it's like a minor nudge and the kid will go play outside, provided that there's, enough stuff to do. So I thought that was quite funny, but yeah, parents know that the kids need to go outside, they need to play, they need to run and jump and, kind of get their energy out. And that's a great way to do it. I think another thing too, to keep in mind is that a lot of times, and I'm sure you've seen this like a million times, but when the parents are fit, like you said, it kind of encourages the kids to want to be fit too, because they want to emulate their parents. Like they're not going to listen to what you say, but they're going to watch what you do.
That's a good point.
And I remember a number of years ago when I was living in Jerusalem, I would go to the playground near my apartment and I would just do pull-ups and dips and stuff like that. And I remember there was some dad had brought his kids to play like on the playground equipment, and I was doing these pull-ups and these other things like that. And suddenly he felt like the need to start doing some pull-ups as well. And then his kid wanted to join him, like come off of the, and it wasn't my intention to do anything like that. But if you live in a community that has, like a lot of younger families and stuff like that, and it's also good to know that you can influence your peers. So they'll see you doing some exercise and they think, oh, I can do that. Why not? Right. And then their kids will say, oh, that looks like fun. Maybe I'll do the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, it's a good cascading effect.
Absolutely. And I think that the important thing too is that because from what I remember, it's been many years since I've been in Denver, but Denver's a very physically fit place, is it not?
Oh, it is. The people you meet here are so kind and so outdoorsy, if that's the right word.
Absolutely.
Yeah, life revolves around that. Like back to the very beginning, Omaha in the Midwest, for that matter, from what I've observed living there and traveling through it, it's a different kind of demographic, different kind of eating habits, and different kind of recreational habits. Here in Colorado, you're weird if you don't hike or ski or snowboard. You're not shunned, but being that everybody's pretty kind out here, you're highly encouraged to join somebody to go do those activities or something. Get a dog. Everybody here has a dog. We have 2 dogs. Like, it's a very active area.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's the kind of peer pressure that I like. Peer
Yeah.
pressure that's not like, smoke this pot, but it's like, hey, go for a hike.
Yeah. Some people might smoke pot while they're hiking out here. It is legal,
That's
but
true.
yeah.
I guess it wasn't the best example. We'll use a different drug.
No, but I get what you're saying, Alex. It's a very good point. It's good positive reinforcement. And for example, our gym, Existence Athletics here, definitely tied in with kettlebells, with strong first. We've done the SF lifter here, and then the SFGs, SFG2 here. The community is all very outdoor based. We do we just did a snowshoe hike, a midnight one 2 weekends ago, and this is common, or at least from what I perceive. Like my world I've created around me is people are like minded. So what I see is this very often, and yeah, very outdoor activities, like a lot of climbing. I'm not very much of a climber. I like terra firma, but there's a lot of climbers out here. Yeah, it's hard to not be active out here. I don't know what you would do in Colorado if you weren't active. I really
It's kind
don't.
of been, there's probably not a whole lot,
Yeah.
leave. That's what you do.
TV. I don't know. What do you do?
Yeah, exactly. Now, you've mentioned the Colorado personal fitness, right?
Yes, sir.
Colorado Personal Fitness. Like I said, like with last names, I always want to make sure I'm saying them correctly, and then also
I appreciate
names.
that.
I don't want to put people in the, send it to the wrong website or whatever.
Mhm.
Do you have a website so that people can follow you? Facebook, all that other good stuff.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Colorado Personal Fitness, if you want to see my students and clients doing outdoor stuff and split boarding. If you want to learn more about outdoor companies, well, as Endearment, we have 42 riders. We work with, this week alone, we had 20 meetings at Outdoor Retailer with, like, say, Fjallraven, Smith Optics, Patagonia, North Face. We work with those companies to go test their products before they come out. We test them in the mountains of Colorado. Like tonight, after I'm done training, I'm done at 2:00. I'm taking my truck and my dogs going to the mountains, testing some 0-degree sleeping bags for a thermal rest. Going to go camp in the morning, wake up, climb a mountain, snowboard down, and come back. That's what we do. We play in the mountains, we test gear, and for that, it is Endearment.com.
Beautiful.
Yeah, that's you can find me and the riders and the teams.
Endearment.com, and you got a great podcast as well.
Well, thank you for saying.
Yeah, how can people find that? You're probably on all the major platforms, or not? Are you not?
Yeah. It blows my mind when I get the stats every Sunday, like number 4 in Honduras, number 1 in Estonia. I've never been to Estonia. 9 in Japan, and it's because of people like you, Alex, who've been on the podcast and have good messages to share. So thank you for being part of that. It's been fantastic.
It's a privilege. Absolutely. Most definitely. Now, I'll ask one last wild card question before we sign off. Now, you spent a good deal of time camping out in Colorado. Has there ever been any hair-raising experiences you've had while you were out there?
I witnessed an avalanche during avalanche level 2 education. That was exciting. And
I suppose
my partner,
yeah, go ahead.
My partner fell into an ice crevasse while that happened. And everybody in our group was watching the avalanche happen, which didn't directly affect us, but we did report it to the CAIC, which is Colorado Avalanche Information Center. And they were really focused because there's 2 ski tracks going into the avalanche and none coming out, which is not a good sign.
No.
Yeah, it all worked out well. The skiers did evade the avalanche, but it was R2 D2.5, which is a very sizable avalanche. Meanwhile, my partner, Navy SEAL, actually, between deployments, fell into an ice crevasse. And we had to create a human chain of people to slide across this ice lake and pull him out. And he was so cool. He said, "Has anybody seen my shades?" Just super cool. But yeah, that was a fun time. I've seen a lot of moose, which moose, I'm not too sure if everybody knows, but are among the most dangerous animals in North America. Do not approach a moose. Oh, yeah, do not approach a moose. They will mess you up.
I would imagine, man. They're like 7 feet tall at the shoulder.
Oh, they're so tall. And they're territorial.
Yeah.
And our dogs are really good at finding them for some reason. Saw a badger 2 months ago. Don't mess with the badger.
But that's honey badgers, right? Regular badgers, are they also violent?
I didn't want to take a chance. It's just waddling through the snow, and I thought it was a porcupine, which is another one you don't want to mess with the quills. I'm sounding like everything's scary out here. Nothing's
it's like the American version of Australia out in Colorado.
Yeah, but I think your question was like, was this the hairiest? Those were pretty exciting situations, and they weren't in any direct danger, except for the moose. That was pretty close because we had like a 4-year-old kid and a 3-year-old kid, and they're like pretty close to the moose. I ran like a weirdo hero and grab the kids and then come back and put them in the car, then take pictures of the moose because it is a big moose.
Yeah, no, of course. Yeah, it's better to take a picture from a distance and as opposed
Yeah.
to get one of those found footage things going, like later. That would not be good. Well, folks, again, go to check out Endearment, check out the Endearment podcast on your podcasting platform of choice. Be sure to check out Colorado Personal Fitness as well. And by all means, get outdoors, do some fun stuff. Now's the time.
Absolutely. Well said, Alex. Thank you for having me on the show, and thank you to your audience for checking this out. Hopefully it was entertaining and educational in some way.
Well, I had a blast. So if they didn't, they're wrong. That's the general rule.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for coming on, man. It was a real pleasure.
My pleasure.
And folks, as always, have fun and happy training.